I'm not trying to sell you fortune cookies, but I did have a sense that something like this would happen. That's why I spent my last few videos talking about game theory and war. And I need to bother you with one more video on this topic, and then I promise I'll go back to ranting. So if you want to have a more nuanced understanding about war and peace, you must read this article. I repeat, you must read it. It is the foundation of the entire modern international relations research. I'm not kidding. It does not have the super advanced or sophisticated models like the newer papers, but exactly because it's succinct and accessible, it managed to reach the entire political science community and inspired a paradigm revolution in studying conflict. According to Google Scholar, it was cited more than 6,000 times by other peer-reviewed publications. So the most charming thing about the paper is that it logically exhausts all the possibilities for rational players to have war. Well, of course, war can also have irrational reasons, which is not the concern of that paper. But think about it. If the ruler of a country is smart enough to rise to the top, they shouldn't be too crazy. I mean, they can be evil and perverted and whatever, but they have to be strategic enough to acquire that much power. So most of the time, they should be considered rational players, right? So let me tell you what this paper is about. Firstly, it assumes that two countries are disputing the ownership of something whose value is 1. You can imagine it to be 1 billion barrels of oil, or maybe 1,000 square kilometers of land, or maybe one particular island or whatever, but the value is 1. The second assumption is that if the two states choose to have a war, then whoever wins acquires the whole disputed item, which is worth 1, and the other player gets 0. And if they negotiate a settlement, they can each have part of it. The third assumption, both countries are rational, which means they calculate their expected payoff from war in this way. So the expected payoff, well, in this paper, the author used the term utility. It means exactly the same thing, right? Utility and payoff, potato. They both mean whatever satisfaction you derive from a certain outcome. So the expected utility from war equals the utility of winning times the probability of winning, plus the utility of losing times the probability of losing, and then minus the cost of war, which can be, the money you spend, the manpower you lose, etc. So you might ask, why is this considered the rational way of calculating expected utility? Because this is exactly the same way those finance people calculate the value of a financial asset. Let's say there's a financial asset, a stock or a bond or whatever. If it has a 70% chance of bringing you $100 and a 30% chance of bringing you $50, then how much is this financial asset worth? Well, it's worth 100 times 70% plus 50 times 30% equals to $85. Well, of course, if you don't like risk, you want your income to be predictable, then maybe you will think it's worth less than $85 because it involves risk. But at least we know for sure that no rational investor will buy that asset for anything higher than $85. If you do that, you're not an investor, you're a gambler, and you will be broke. So if you want to learn more about why this calculation makes sense, we can save it for another video. But just trust me for now. Okay, now assume the probability for party A to win the war is P. and the probability for party B to win the war is 1 minus P. That makes sense, right? If two of us are fighting, if my chance of winning is 60%, then your chance of winning must be 40%. So we have to add up to 1. That's how probability works. So the payoff from war for party A is 1, which is the payoff from winning, times P, which is the probability of winning. So 1 times P plus 0 times 1 minus P. 0 is the payoff from losing, and 1 minus P is the probability of losing. So 1 times P plus 0 times 1 minus P, and then minus the cost incurred on party A. So if we simplify this, we get P minus CA. And the payoff from war for party B is 1 times 1 minus P, because for B, the probability of winning is 1 minus P. So 1 times 1 minus P plus 0 times the probability for B to lose, which is P. So 1 times 1 minus P plus 0 times P minus the cost incurred on party B. So when we simplify this, we got 1 minus P minus CB. So the expected payoff from war for party A is P minus CA. And the expected payoff from war for party B is 1 minus P minus CB. What does that mean? It means if the two sides can find a way to divide the disputed item by P and 1 minus P, both of them will be better off, which means war shouldn't happen at all, right? If party A gets P, it's better off than P minus CA. If party B gets 1 minus P, it's better off than 1 minus P minus CB. So why would they fight at all? According to this logic, war should simply not happen. Even a stronger side should negotiate because there's a chance of losing. So your expected value will always be lower than the whole thing. And the rational player should take into account the probability of losing. So what if one side is so strong that it has a 100% chance of winning? Well, in that case, the other side shouldn't even make the claim in the first place. Like, you have a 0 chance of winning, why do you even bother? So whatever P equals to, whether the two sides are equal or unequal, war shouldn't happen anyway. So let's try a numerical example. Let's say P equals 0.6, which means party A is slightly stronger. It has a 60% chance of winning. And party B obviously has a 40% chance of winning. And CA and CB are both 0.1, right? So the cost of war for each side is 0.1. Now, party A's expected payoff from war should be 0.6 minus 0.1, which is 0.5. And party B's expected payoff from war should be 0.4 minus 0.1, which is 0.3. So you see the problem here. Why should anyone accept this kind of expected payoff, 0.5 and 0.3, when you can simply divide the territory by 0.6 and 0.4, which will make both sides better off, right? So according to this logic, no rational players should ever have war, right? But no. The author of this paper, James Fearon, identifies 3 reasons for this model to break down. The first is incomplete information, right? What if two sides have different estimate of P? Say the party A thinks they have an 80% chance of winning, which means P equals 0.8. But party B is like, no, we have an 80% chance of winning, which means P equals 0.2. If they have different beliefs about their probability of winning, that can be a big problem. And that kind of discrepancy is not that uncommon because military information is normally classified. So you only know what you have, but not what the other side has. So you can end up with Party A having a 0.7 expected utility from war and Party B having a 0.6 expected utility from war. So neither of them will accept a settlement that gives them less than half. So the lack of information can be a trigger for war. And the second reason Fearon identifies is the credible commitment problem under first mover advantage, which I discussed in detail last time. When no one can enforce the deal you guys strike, then the other side could just use the deal as a break to prepare for the next round, to empower themselves and one day stab you in the back. Right? The commitment problem is very hard to solve in conflict because normally there's just no higher authority to enforce whatever two countries agree on. Please check out my last two videos. The third possibility for bargaining failure is the indivisibility problem. So in order to reach a deal, the disputed item has to be divisible. Right? You need to be okay with getting part of it. But what if it's something that you can't divide? I remember in those period dramas, some European folks would just have a duel over a lover because apparently they can't divide the lover. Of course, that was stupid, right? Because why can't you just let the lady choose, right? But despite the backward ethics, it's a good example to show how indivisibility can cause conflict. Also, let's say religion. Some people, for some reason, may think that their country can only have one religion. You can't do half-half. Well, I think it's stupid, but it's still rational in a way because maybe the psychological comfort from religion is part of their payoff calculation. They need it. So who am I to call it irrational? But Fearon believes that the indivisibility problem is a less likely reason for war. I kind of agree with him. Personally, I think everything has a price, even religion. Well, maybe I'm too cynical because I never experienced religious feelings, so I don't know, I could be wrong. So yeah, that was James Fearon, 1995, which I consider the most important paper on international relations. And the argument is not even limited to any specific time and space, it's just pure logic. Oh, and most academic papers have a paywall, but this one is so famous that you can find it everywhere for free. So give it a look.